Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting for February 26, 2024. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of lands on which we live. As we begin, are there any disclosures of interest? Seeing none, we can move on to our first agenda item, which is the approval of the agenda. Can I please get a mover and seconder for the approval of the agenda? I've got and Margot Snipe. Resolved that the agenda for the February 26, 2024 Public Works meeting be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have the receipt of previous minutes. Can I get a mover and seconder for the receipt of the previous minutes? Member Rady, and seconded by Councillor Cristangi. Resolved that the November 27th, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting minutes be received. All in favor? That is approved. All right, our first agenda item, 6.1, is the Public Works touch points. Brandon, do you want to get started on that one?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Jessica's over there. Awesome. I'm used to seeing someone over there. Anyways, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council and our committee. So this Public Works Department was asked to attend a recent DIA meeting on February 14th, just to provide an update on some of the downtown projects, the parking study, and so on. So what I thought I would do was just bring that to committee as well for run you through and update you on some of the things going on downtown. Realize that we have come direct to council on a few of the items, particularly the parking study and the downtown reimagined, and I thought this might be a way of making sure that we're keeping you in the loop or keeping you informed. Some of the information is based on the public information centers that we had in late last year, and I'm pleased to say that I saw a few of you out there, so it might be a review for some of you. So anyways, I'll try not to take long, and I can take questions at the end. So for those of you who have heard it before, I apologize. So if we can go to slide number 2. Perfect. So these are just the talking points that we wanted to speak to today. And then slide number 4. And then just let me get my notes here. Let me go back one. Page. Okay, so this just shows you the Downtown Reimagine project. Obviously, it's a multi-year project culminating in construction in 2025 and 2026. 2021 and 2022 was really a visioning exercise. Going out to the public and engaging our downtown partners to see what was the long-term vision for the downtown. You have to come in there and dig up a water main, opportune time if we're digging up the road to make some improvements there. Out of that study, or out of that the engagement, we heard a number of positive things that we've developed into our design package, as well as we heard some concerns mainly about parking and traffic, which we did a study in 2023 for each of those to address those. So leading conceptual design guidelines and the actual concept are before council, came before council last meeting. Now, there were some questions about the process, and they've asked for more information, and we'll be coming back on March 4th, hopefully to answer those questions. So hopefully after that meeting, we'll be moving into the detailed design phase over the course of 2024. And basically that'll involve, further engagement with the businesses down there. We're looking at a traffic management plan and determining how best to stage the work and phase the work to not only to get in there and out of there safely and efficiently, but also looking how we can minimize the impact to those businesses down there. Ultimately, building a tender package that will allow us to put it out to public tender and then hire a contractor for construction in 2025 or 2026. It won't take 2 years to build, but we have some time built in there just again to sort out with the business owners, trying to work with them to see, to be flexible in terms of how best to construct that to limit the impacts to them. Next slide. So, yep, this one here. So this slide shows just the limits of the construction. The red dotted lines are where the water main is slated to be reconstructed or replaced. There's a green line that runs down Christie and Mountain, which is a potential water main replacement that we're looking at, considering. It wasn't originally included in our scope, but we're trying to figure out if it makes sense to do that now or come back later. For context, the water main on Main Street is 1955 and the water main on Mountain Street is 1957. So they're essentially the same age. It's just a matter of what makes most sense to in terms of construction. And then the yellow box, I will say, or tan box, is the area or limits of the urbanization or the reconstruction. So where we're doing the sidewalks and landscaping and things like that, which I'll talk about a little bit further. Next slide. So this is just the principles that were developed as part of the Downtown Reimagined, what we heard from the stakeholders. And I won't get into those in detail, but if we can go to the next slide. Basically, we've taken those principles and developed a concept plan that we've brought forward for a council endorsement. And essentially, the concept is building on the principles that were on the previous slide. So we're looking at things like a larger pedestrian space, narrowing the roadway to slow traffic and provide a more pedestrian-friendly feel. Introducing a mid-block pedestrian crossing just right near the downtown Grimsby existing sign is, overhead arch. And then we're looking at flexible spaces that can be converted from parking to a sidewalk space and vice versa. And also looking at refreshing the streetscaping, so trees, streetlights, benches, bike racks, and so on. Again, just keep in mind this is a conceptual plan, so this is is subject to change as we move through detailed design, but it's kind of setting the initial foundation for how we want to proceed and the initial vision for primarily the road cross-section, which is on the next slide. And basically what we're trying to achieve there, is the existing parking lanes or which are consisting of asphalt now. We'll be looking at converting them to some form of flexible space that can be converted from parking or to pedestrian space depending on the time of the year. So when not being used for parking, it could be used for a patio space and so on. So and then I'll skip to the next slide. Actually, one more. So one of the other feedbacks that we heard during the downtown project was concerns about the impact it would have, the changes would have on parking. So there's concerns raised about the current supply as well as the future supply of parking within, the development intensification area that's coming down to the downtown. So over the course of 2023, we carried out a comprehensive parking study for both downtown and then the Grimsby on the Lake as well. Involved, public consultation, parking counts were used to determine, the parking that's occurring, existing. We consulted with the owners of the businesses down there in both locations, and there was some public information centers as well involving just the public. So the final recommendations, outcomes of the study came to council on February 5th, and those outcomes were approved, and basically we're moving into a third phase of the project, which I'll talk about on the next coming slides. So this study determined, just at a high level, that we currently have, and this is downtown, so this was focused to the DIA, so just keep that in mind. So it determined in the downtown core, that we have an adequate supply of parking, but when taking into consideration future growth, we anticipate that we might start feeling some pain somewhere between 2030 and 2041. Next slide. And with this in mind, this is where we would start looking at implementing strategies, and this would build on the recommendations that came out of the study, and that would help to mitigate that pain. Next slide. So the strategies we're looking at is focused into four main themes: optimizing the existing supply through changes in regulations, optimizing the supply through enhancements to the actual parking lots, expanding the municipal supply of parking through various other means, and introducing new parking policies that will help support the overall strategy. And I'll talk about each of those further. So the first one was, next slide, please. First one was optimizing the existing through regulations. So one of the most cost-effective ways for us to bring efficiencies is to basically introduce regulations or regulated parking durations. So what we saw in the study was the Balsam parking lot was well utilized. That's on the south side near the LCBO, the south side of Maine. However, the parking lots on the north side or the Teddy side or the Giant Tiger side were actually underutilized. So one of the strategies we could consider is implementing parking restrictions that help spread that parking out around to the lots that are currently underutilized, and that would come through some form of signage and trying to spread those parking around. Excuse me. Next slide. The second one was optimizing parking through enhancements. So that would be including things like our wayfinding strategies, so enhancing our signage and our digital information to help better inform our public and visitors as to the availability of parking. Also, we want to look at activating the alleyways that link the parking lots to Main Street. And that would be through things like lighting, artwork, making sure the walking surfaces are accessible, and just making sure they're more inviting to allow pedestrians to travel through those alleyways in a safe manner. Also considering adding beautification to the rear parking lots, which will help ensure the safe, inviting areas for the rear of the buildings, and as well as activating the rear building faces, and maybe that's encouraging those spaces to be used for more than just parking in the back. So next slide. And then the other thing that we were looking at is expanding the public parking supply, and one method would be in the form of a public-private partnership agreements that would look at expanding the size of the surface that we have for parking, essentially by removing the property lines that can impede the efficiency of the lots. One of the things our study showed was that the private parking spaces were actually underutilized in comparison to the public parking lots. So what we'd be looking at doing is establishing some form of a framework in which the town and private property owners could work together to share the parking areas to make them be used more efficiently. So again, essentially we'd be taking a disjointed canvas with a bunch of property lines and trying to remove those property lines and creating more of a blank canvas with more space that we could create some efficiencies there. Another option would be for us to expand the limits of existing parking lots. We have the Elizabeth Street parking lot and Lions Pool as well, that we could look at providing additional parking there. And in terms of longer-term strategies, look at things like land acquisition, multi-level parking structures, and or private-public development opportunities. Again, we see those more as long-term solutions, but something that we expect to explore through the next phase. Next slide. And then, this was just to show, similar to the previous slide, this shows the kind of the property configuration on the rear, the north parking lot. So the green and red and yellow lines are all the different properties, and on the right-hand side is if we can combine that into one large supply, maybe we can bring some efficiencies to that. So that will be the next phases of our project is to meet with those business owners and see if we can work together in coming up with that concept. Next slide. So the last recommendation was to look at how we can implement policies that would help, and include things like a cash in lieu of parking policy that allows property owners to request reductions in the parking requirements in exchange for cash. The cash could then be used to fund the various improvements that we mentioned earlier. And then I think that's it for that section. So skip a few slides. So this was, we just wanted to talk to the business about the Century Condos development. So this slide shows basically the existing location or the existing property where the new building is going. The red limits, the red dashed lines are basically where the building is going to go. One of the biggest challenge with this property is that the property is essentially all building, so it means that it's difficult to construct in terms of space surrounding it. So one of the requests that the developer has asked is if they can close one of the lanes on Main Street to allow them to construct the building as they move through the construction progress. So the town is working with the developer and our partners at the region to look at a construction management plan, and that would look at things like how the construction vehicles will access and egress the site, where the workers will park their vehicles during construction, and how we can minimize the impact of traffic flow through the downtown core. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, they are looking at a lane closure within the area, and we've identified that here as basically as a staging area. There's a few benefits to this. First and utmost is the safety of workers and pedestrians. Basically, this area would be cordoned off and used for construction vehicles only, and pedestrians would be not permitted within this area. And I'll talk about the pedestrian plan in a minute. The second benefit is that the lane closure will allow the work to be completed more quickly and efficiently, and allowing them to get in and out of there quickly. So it's more of a short-term pain for a long-term gain. I will say, obviously, there will be an impact on traffic flow, and we are working with the developer in the region to sort through those concerns and trying to minimize that as much as we can. Next slide. This diagram just shows in cross-section what the lane closure would look like. So they have the two lanes of traffic on the left-hand side, your construction vehicles on the right-hand side with the building facade there. And then next slide. No, this might be hard to see, but we're looking at options for detouring traffic through the downtown. And mainly in the westbound direction. So we're looking at potential restriction, a couple of options. One was to restrict left turns onto Elm, requiring vehicles to continue on Main and Mountain and return back via Elm Street. It's kind of a green arrow or a green dashed line there. And then the second option would be to restrict the through movement and have them turn left on Elm. Now, we did hear some feedback from the DAA, some concerns with the left-hand, the one option with the yellow. But again, we'll continue to explore that with the region and the developer to ensure that we're, again, minimizing the impact of traffic where we can. Okay, next slide. So this is concerning pedestrian movements. So what we're looking at is installing a temporary pedestrian crossover with a button activated signals at Kingsway Boulevard, just denoted by the yellow star there. And this would allow pedestrians to cross over to access the businesses on the north side of Main Street without having to backtrack all the way through the signals at Maple Avenue. So it's just providing a safe crossing point there. And that's it for that section. And then, yeah, so the next slide. This was just, again, from our Public Information Center or the guidance document that we pulled together that WSP help us pull together. Talks about things like how we can provide additional beautification to the downtown area. You know, there's been some requests for the consideration of decorative banners and electrical supply for seasonal lighting, which we will certainly include as part of the design. We also want to expand the conversation, you know, beyond that to cover some things that other options that may be considered as part of the project. And there's a few slides here that talk about some of those things. So returning back to the guiding principles we mentioned earlier, there's really looking at many different ways that, again, we can help enhance the public realm in the area. And then next slide. Flexible spaces, so that's like basically the area on the sidewalk, the wider sidewalks that we'll be creating will provide, you know, additional opportunities for things like patios. We'll also be introducing new street space features such as benches, landscaping, new lighting, banner arms, and electrical sources for various uses, including the seasonal lighting, and maybe not just the season, winter season either, something that we can do year-round. Next slide. And then we'll also be looking at opportunities to provide, you know, placemaking features. There's some and photo opportunities. Things like public art displays, wall murals, and so on. Again, the idea is to add some vibrancy to the downtown, but while at the same time we want to make sure that we're being complimentary of the distinct heritage of this area. So I'm not sure the giant parrot is a great example of what we're trying to achieve down there, but you know, we're looking at what ways we can provide artwork that would be complimentary of our area. Yeah, and again, just that we'll have to work through. Obviously, this project is going to be a big impact to the businesses down there, and we want to make sure that we can engage them as best we can through this process to make sure that we're being partners on this project, because it's going to be a headache for both of us for at least a couple of years. So, anyways, so that was it for the presentation, and I was happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Brandon. That's a terrific summary. Questions for Brandon? Councillor DeVoley, and then we'll...
Thank you. 3 questions. My first one has to do with something that probably was talked about when you were talking about downtown parking. And there was a reference made to the cash and lieu policy. And I always think of cash and lieu sort of when we have new developments. So expand upon that thought as to how we could utilize that concept if we don't have any new developments. Does it work? I mean, does it only work with, I guess, new construction, new development projects down there? Could you just expand on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the idea is, and that's only one opportunity that I mentioned. There's other things that we can look at, community improvement plans. What's the CBC? Anyone, CBC? Community benefit charges. This is another one. It's another area that you can look at how we can provide funding for things that. Let me back up a little bit. We used to be able to collect, we as in municipalities were able to collect charges, development charges for things like parking. when the rules changed a couple years ago, they've removed the parking element out of there. So we're no longer allowed to collect development charges specific to parking. There's introduced community benefits charges as another way. It's similar to a development charge, but it's specific to other things that aren't covered as through the DCs, and that would be another mechanism. Sorry, getting back to your question. So the question was about let's see. I went on too long that I talked myself out of the cash in lieu policy is specific to new development. And again, this, I guess the idea is that developers could request reductions in the amount of parking that they are required to provide as specified in the zoning bylaw in exchange for cash. And that cash could then be used for us to put to public parking lots. So the challenge that we have as staff is we want to make sure that that the development is still providing a minimum amount of parking that can sustain itself, but we understand, so they'd have to basically justify the reduction that they're requesting. And what we would like to do is, in the past, I guess what we would like to do is establish a policy going forward to make sure that that process is clearly transparent. Council has an opportunity to review that policy and ensure that they're informed, and this is the framework that we're using in terms of how we're dealing with that cash in lieu of policy going forward. Does that make sense? Sorry, it was a long-winded answer.
If I could continue with my next two questions, which will probably be shorter. When we're talking about the Century condos going in and the construction management plan and so on, we have Doran Avenue behind there, very narrow street of, full of residential. Are there plans to reconstruct that road eventually, or could you, I guess my question really is, could you just expand upon how Doran will be used while the construction is going on, and if there will be any changes or improvements made to it after the construction is finished?
As it stands, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. As it stands right now, the developer, if there's any damage done to the road, they'd be responsible for making improvements to it or fixing what they broke. In terms of how they're utilizing Doran, as part of the construction management plan, we've asked them to consider how they can use Doran more to maybe reduce some of the time that they're on Main Street. There are some constraints with Doran in that it's a narrower road allowance and that it has the school bus access for, I can't remember the school name, say Joe School, as well. So there are some challenges with that as well, but yes, we're looking at how we can try to minimize the impact to Main Street.
Thank you. And then my third question has to do with our downtown improvement concept. And a number of years ago, the region and the town had a funding program in place for downtown facade improvement. Is there any opportunity to revive any of that as part of our downtown improvements? And to encourage our downtown businesses to improve their facades after we go through and really improve the road, the sidewalks, and so on. Has any thought been given to that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure of the status of the facade improvements policy program, whatever you want to call it. There are other programs that are there. It's certainly something we can take away and look into it in more detail. There are other programs that we can apply to, and I think the business owners are as well. They call it a public realm investment program, which includes things like beautification and landscaping and things like that. We actually used that when we did the alleyway for Harmony Jewelers. We did some improvements in there a couple years ago, kind of on the onset of this program, and the PRIP funding was used for that.
Councillor Davoli, regarding the facade improvement programs, the region has discontinued their matching of municipal funds. So the way it used to work was if the town of Grimsby contributed 10,000 to a facade improvement, the region would match that. So that's been discontinued. So that's why we're looking at other programs for heritage properties, and we're asking staff to investigate those because that has ceased at the regional level. So we need to find alternatives to do what you want to do. So, Member Smake, you next, and then Member Rady.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions about timing and the best way we may be able to stage some of these projects downtown. I'm starting to have increasing concern with going to council in March. There isn't an RFP yet, so that will be April, May. Detailed design would start May. And would there be able to have any kind of construction take place in 2025? I know about that, the time limit, October 2026. Can you expand upon how you seemed quite confident that you wouldn't need 2 years for construction? And I'm looking at the staging in terms of traffic flow, and I'm concerned about that. Maybe if you could expand on that to start, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I didn't want to scare everyone that we're going to be building a road from January 2025 to December of 2026. We're thinking around 6 to 9 months, in that range in terms of construction, probably closer to 9. What we'll be doing is fleshing out with this RFP, which is close to getting on market right now. We're currently working on it. Is how bringing in an engineering consultant that can help, hopefully, with some experience in downtown projects like this, and we can rely on their expertise in terms of helping us. We have some ideas about how we can stage things, but we want to flesh that out. And a big component of that will be in conversations with the downtown businesses. We've already heard, please don't build in September, October, because that's our peak season. Now, that's one comment. Does that apply to everyone? We're not sure, but we'll flesh out that conversation to make sure that we're trying to be cognizant of everyone's concerns. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yes, it does, and I definitely understand how your 9 months might be in 2 chunks in 2 different years in order to best accommodate the businesses. Certainly, I see some advantage to doing some improvements of the parking off, like, the Balsam and the main lots prior to the actual construction taking place on the Main Street portion downtown, just so that there's some additional parking. I think just through reconfiguration that may be able to do that. On the same kind of topic with the Century condos, can you tell us what their anticipated time frame will be for the construction? And is there any way that we can either take advantage of it? There will be some times when Main Street won't be available, and maybe we can have that occur at the same time, or certain stages of our project which definitely should not take place at the same time as Century condos.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. It's exactly what we're trying to sort through. Like step one is trying to figure out, the impact or how the developer's going to accommodate their work, and we're hearing it's 18 months to 24 months of construction in that area. And then we're going to be rolling in that same kind of period, and how are we going to make sure that we're not tripping over each other? So, as part of the town's project, we'll be looking at things like, is there potential for, closing a section of the downtown Main Street between Ontario and Christie or Mountain, just to allow the work to maybe commence a little bit quicker. One benefit of Grimsby is that we do have parking in both the rear parking lots. And again, I maybe I didn't touch on it in much detail in the presentation, but we do want to make sure that, we have some form of campaign working with our business owners to make sure that, to communicate to the public that businesses are open, and a heavy part of the consultant's involvement and the contractor's involvement. And what we'll be asking for is, helping with a kind of a liaison to manage the businesses, and because it's going to be basically a full-time job there, making sure the businesses are being heard, and that we're accommodating pedestrian traffic as things change and as the construction commences. That we have really someone on site that is kind of with their first point of contact for the businesses and ourselves to make sure that we're working together collectively to deliver the project.
Member Rady?
Thank you, Chair. I'm baffled. I'm looking at this. So 18 to 24 months for Century Condos. And I'm looking at this. It's a pretty convoluted detour plan, really. I mean, to try and work around this, because trying to make a left-hand turn at Elm is going to be suicide. That's where all the trucks are going to be buffering, right? Right at the TD Bank. And so if somebody decides to turn left, everything just stops. But you guys have thought of that. So you're going to suggest they go straight until we shut down Maine to do the water. Then where does everybody go? Is that part of your discussion with Century Condo? Because effectively, there could be a period of 6 to 9 months where the entire area down there is shut down, by the looks of it. Because you're going to be doing concurrent projects. Now, am I missing something here, or is that what's happening? So we got 18 to 24 months. When is Century starting? Have they got a planned date? Do we know?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So as far as we know, the developer is looking to start this spring, as soon as possible is what we're hearing. So, and yes, there likely will be some overlap, and we're looking at ways of how we can minimize that. In terms of the left turn movements, and this is where a developer's consultant is looking at traffic impact study to try to minimize that. And some of the things they will be considering is how they can maybe reconfigure the lights to provide a better flow through. So if they were looking at a left turn movement only as one of the options, then you don't have the cars waiting for the through cars waiting to go left. It's everyone's going through left. So that was one of the ideas. The other option is if you're going through straight, everyone's going straight, then you don't have anyone waiting to go left. So those are some of the ideas. And obviously they'll be looking at, cycling, like they can change the lights and how they cycle, the different sections or the different approaches to see how they can make that flow better, and they can model that through a traffic model. But yes, it's going to be very challenging, and it's going to be a tough couple of years, but again, we're hoping it's a short-term pain for a long-term gain, and we're setting up our downtown for the next 50 years.
Just one other question about the pedestrian detour. So do we honestly expect people are going to walk all the way back up to Kingsway to cross the street legally, or should we just park an ambulance at Station 1? It used to be a fire hall. Because I got a feeling that's where they're all going to cross. I mean, you're looking at this map, and the marshalling area, the staging area, whatever you want to call it, is right at Station 1. And we're asking people now to go back up to the Pioneer gas station to cross, and then come all the way back down. We're asking people, does anybody at this table think that's what's going to happen, or I'm just curious?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see like the yellow area is basically what we're considering is impassable. So you have the basically at Elm Street, the east leg of Elm Street is an existing crossing throughout the lights, and then we'll be installing a new crossing, a temporary crossing at Kingsway that would allow anyone in between to utilize Kingsway as they approach. So we're providing basically two areas for people to cross east-west on Main. Can we prevent people from jaywalking, for a lack of a better word? I guess they're taking their lives in their own hands if they do it, but we're trying to provide safe crossing points for them in accordance with the regulatory requirements.
I don't think I've ever crossed at an intersection downtown, to be honest with you. So I don't want to encourage people to jaywalk, but if you know the history of the term
putting one in the middle
jaywalking,
for you.
if you know, I don't know if you've ever heard the history, and I want to give other people a chance. No, it's not offensive. It was created by the auto industry because they wanted to make roads for cars rather than for pedestrians, because roads were for pedestrians. And so I think that people knowing that there are people that walk on the road is a good thing, and encouraging people to feel safe is a good thing. I'm glad that we have a crossing, but jaywalking was manufactured by the auto industries to make roads for cars rather than for people. So I'm fine with people turning them back into roads for people. Member Murphy?
Oh, just a quick question. Would you consider changing the no left turn requirement at Christie Street?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We did look at that. I think the region was expressed some concerns with that, primarily from because if there's any heavy trucks through there, they can't make that left turn because of the angle. It's like a acute angle. Was that grade 10 math? So yeah, no, there was some difficulty there. So their preference was to bring them down to the east-west section of Main, and then bring them back around. But again, we'll continue to advance that conversation with the region.
Other questions from members of the committee? I was going to ask about well, it's a question/comment. I think Member Smith made a really good point about coordinating the parking improvements first, because then all of the other issues that were brought up regarding, through traffic in the downtown and the road closure, if we can make the parking and the rear access to these buildings work before all this happens, then we have less to worry about. We want to make it as welcoming a business environment as possible downtown while this is happening. I get that it's going to be more difficult. I think everybody understands that, including the people downtown. It's a long-term project, and it's meant to improve things in the long term, like you said, and like I said at council. What we do now is for 50 years from now, so we want to make sure we do it right. I think that fixing that parking, though, is a good part of that long-term plan. I think accessing those buildings from the rear, and whether it's with the aid of a consultant or, if we have the staff that is capable of doing it, to help these businesses improve their accesses from the rear parking. I think it's a long-term win-win, and it really will help make those rear parking lots more of an inviting place for people to park, so they don't feel like they need to park in front of the buildings. And then the flexible parking that you're talking about on Main Street becomes less necessary, and it becomes more of like a secondary parking that in case people need it to run in and out of a business, but they're going to feel more comfortable parking in the rear. So if you want to comment to that about the parking.
Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair. So, the first point is in terms of the timing of that, we do have a project identified as part of our budget, which was approved earlier this week, I believe, that will look at exploring the next phase of our parking study, which will involve engaging those different property owners down there. So, can I'd be lying if I said we're going to have the parking lots repaved and in beautiful shape before we do the water main project or the downtown project. I don't think that's reasonable, but we are going to look at, are there some quick wins, short-term improvements that we can get into place before construction happens to help kind of soften the blow, I guess. One of the things I think is encouraging is we've heard from a few of them, of the business owners, property owners, about the alleyways and what they can do to help kind of encourage people using those alleyways. So whether that's a signage and lighting and things like that, again, even in the short term, just to make it clear that, hey, it's okay for you to use this alleyway. It's not private, well, it is private property, but we're encouraging you to use it because we know it's in the benefit of everyone. So those are the kind of things that we'll be considering.
Thanks, Brendan. The other thing I was going to mention was we might want to consider, in the same way that we in the past have had grants for facade improvements, consider the cost, including in our budget, something for improvements to access from the rear to these buildings to help these businesses, because it might be, the cost might be, overwhelming for some small businesses, but if we can help assist with that in some way, if it's not a huge cost for the town, again, it would be a win-win, because the more we increase the flexibility of parking, I think the better it is long-term from the town's perspective. Going back to the discussion about the cash and lieu policy, I really feel like that policy, whatever that looks like, needs to, in the most scientific way possible, explain what the cost of parking is, what the long-term cost of parking is, and come as close to matching that cost as possible. I understand that we want housing in the downtown. It's good for business. It's good for the town of Grimsby. But the rest of the properties downtown shouldn't have to subsidize that the parking that's not being provided in those properties. And no matter what, it's a win-win, because you might have properties down there that cannot provide parking on site, but will be willing to pay to provide for parking off-site so that they can develop the property more fully. And whatever we can do from a municipal perspective to make that happen, again, is a win-win, because you get redevelopment in the downtown, you get money invested in the downtown, and we're able to improve our municipal parking lots and do the things that we want to do without having it impact the taxpayers as a whole. So those are the cash and lieu is one that Councillor Davoli brought up that I had some concerns about. So I want to make sure that whatever that looks like really covers the cost of that parking. I'll let you speak, and then I'll go over to Councillor Davoli.
Yeah, sorry, just to answer that question, Mr. Chair. As part of the next phase, we'll be looking at those different improvements that I had mentioned in the presentation, enhancing the parking lots, expanding parking lots in areas, what that would look like, what the costs would be. Then we can value as, here's our action plan for making improvements over the next 20, 30 years. And here's what those costs would be, and that would play into where our cash in lieu of policy is. Basically, then we're coming up with a defined number that is recuperating the cost for paying for all of these improvements. So I agree, we're aligned there, that we're, there is a bit of a subsidy, but at the same time, we want to make sure that it is paying for, the parking improvements that are necessary. That makes sense.
Yeah, and when it comes to public lots, sorry, Councillor, I just wanted to respond to that. When it comes to public lots, I've always seen the downtown as a public space. Our downtown is a public space. So improvements to that is an improvement to the municipality in the same way that we spend money on parks and we spend money on the waterfront trail. The public realm downtown is an important part of Grimsby's public space. So I'm not opposed to spending money there. My opposition is to subsidizing properties that are developing and not providing adequate parking. So I just want to make that clear. Councillor Davoli.
To go back to a previous comment you had made, I just wanted to say thank you for supporting my idea the other night at council when we talked about, having access at the back of the buildings and encouraging our business owners downtown to really look at the back access to their buildings to try and improve somehow the flow through their stores when we know when construction starts that they're going to be kind of cut off at the front. But at the council meeting the other night, when we started talking about that, the director of planning also brought up the possibility that through a community improvement fund or something, I may have the name slightly wrong, that there might be a possibility of funding in some shape and form. And so the plan that night was that he was going to come back to council with more information about that. But I think whatever he comes up with would be really good if we could also share it with this committee too, or whether it's, I'm just thinking the timing. We'll have a council meeting and he'll come back with that brief before another month goes by. But I still think the whatever he researched, he's able to come up with to share with council would be really good to share with this committee. And it is too bad that the region has discontinued the funding, and that's understandable, but perhaps there's some opportunity to go back to the region and ask if they'd like to reconsider it for the town of Grimsby or something for a temporary period, because this is a really major, major project of our town here. Anyway, I leave it with that.
Member Murphy?
Just one last point, that my guess is that people that travel regularly from West Grimsby to East Grimsby are probably going to end up using the Service Road and Clark Street rather than the downtown. And I speak from experience, I'm one of those. And I would suggest putting a stoplight at Clark and Ontario, just as a suggestion to ameliorate, because at the moment, if people are using Clark Street, they have to wait because it's a stop sign. So, a stop light there might alleviate matters a bit.
Certainly, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, it's something we'll look at as part of our next phase.
Thank you. Or else we could just put another speed camera and people will go around just like, because I go on the highway now from east to west every time. I try to avoid the main street as much as possible.
Is it 5 o'clock? Is it 40? Is it 50? Is it, do we?
Yeah. Back to Councillor DeVoley, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but bounce back to what you said, Councillor DeVoley. I think that here, necessity might be the mother of invention, and if the fronts of those buildings are closed, people are going to need to find another way in, and I'm hoping that we can make that so that long-term it becomes, a flexible entrance. Seeing no further questions, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation, please. Member Murphy and Councillor Kristanji. Moved by Member Murphy, seconded by Councillor Kristanji. Resolved that the Public Works Touchpoint dated February 26, 2024 be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have DPW 2404. I think Member Spink wanted to lift that.
I did.
So I need mover and a seconder to get report DPW 2404 on the floor for discussion. So Member Spink would be our mover and Councillor Howe, our seconder. Would staff like to start us off on that one?
Sure, I'm going to defer to Ben on this one. For anyone who doesn't know, this is Ben Marcanato. I say it right? Yeah, Ben Marcanato, he's our EHS compliance advisor. Did I get that right too? Oh, two for two tonight. So Ben's with a couple of years, 3 years? 2 and a bit years. So he works with Thomas as part of our compliance team, and he helped prepare this report, and he can speak to the report and any questions.
Thanks, Brandon. Through you, Chair, the report in front of you, the annual drinking water system quality report, is an annual requirement for the town to produce, summarizing mostly its sampling program for the town and listing any of the adverse results on any of those sampling programs. We are required to bring this report to council and then also submit it to our connecting systems.
Member Spink, you had questions?
2 quick questions. Well, one quick one and one may need some discussion. The quick question was, first of all, I learned a lot by reading, some of the details of this, a couple of things that were flagged to me. One was, why weren't we looking at all these different organics? And then I had to go down to Ontario Regulation 170/03 and find out that I think we're a small municipality, so it's every 60 months instead of every 12 months? Yes? If so, it's just a general question. I'm not going to read through the whole regulation. Can you confirm to me that we are following all of the frequency, the timing, and everything in the regulation? That's the first question.
Through you, Chair, yes, we are following all of the regulations that apply to our municipal drinking water system. I think the question might be stemming from the sodium adverses that were seen in Table 2? No? Okay. As a synopsis, in case if anybody has any questions regarding sodium reporting, sodium is a reportable if one has not been submitted or reported in the last 57 months.
Yeah, and if I can just add to, in terms of to make you feel a little bit better, in terms of our meeting the regulation, drinking water system and our compliance system in drinking water is, I would say, heavily regulated. We have annual inspections by the Ministry of Environment, who comes in and basically looks at all our records. On top of that, we have 2 audits. We have an internal audit where we hire a consultant to come in and do a desktop audit of our system. And then also we have a accreditation audit, which is an auditor from the province coming in and making sure that we're doing our due diligence. So it's one thing that I shouldn't say this, but we can sleep well at night that we're making sure that we're following all of the rules as we need to.
And then the second thing that flagged, and this might need a little bit more discussion or maybe giving me some background, was the fact that there's no fluoride. And I lived in Beamsville 30 years ago, and there was fluoride in the water when I had a baby, pretty sure 35 years ago. And I went on it comes from the region. I went on the region's website. They don't fluoridate the water, even though 70% of communities in Ontario fluoridate our water. And there's a whole list of health people who say that this is good for all of our community's health. Perhaps someone could give me the background of why we don't, or is it maybe appropriate for a Public Works Committee to send a letter to the region asking them to reconsider this for the health of our citizens?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not elected, so it's easy. It goes back ever since I've been here, so it's been 15 years. It's been non-fluoride added water. I had conversations in the past with my predecessor about why or why not, and basically the answer was it's a regional decision. They provide the treatment, so I could certainly look into those details on reaching out to the region and find out why. What's the reasoning for not providing chlorine fluoride? But I don't have the answer immediately off the top of my head to say here's the reason why.
No, I know that as long as I've been on council, there hasn't been fluorine in the water. Hamilton does fluoridate the water, and Niagara has not, in my living memory. The evidence points both ways. Like, there's no adverse health risks. Like, I know there are people that believe that there are, but I don't think that there's a lot of evidence, scientific evidence, to support the adverse health risks. But I think that there was debate back in the day, because I asked Brandon's predecessor about it too, why we didn't have it in the water. I asked the same question that you did, because it seemed like, why isn't it there? And I think that there were complaints back in the day, and the region just removed it to not have to deal with the complaints, and then that's where it was left. So if it's something, I think getting the information is something that Mr. Wortman can get for us, but I don't think that we don't have any role in that. No, we don't do water treatment. We deliver it, but we don't treat the water. So
My regional council.
yeah, your regional councilor would be but I would love to know the history of it. So I think that would be interesting. Not that I want to make a project for you, but if it's something as simple as sending an email, then I'd love to know the story behind it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sure Ben would be very happy to look into it further.
Delegation is very important.
He wasn't even looking at you.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding DPW 2404? Seeing none, moved by Member Spink, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that report DPW 2404 2023 Annual Drinking Water System Quality Report dated February 26, 2024 be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have a report DPW 2401 on the water system financial plan. Can I get a mover and a seconder to get the item on the floor, please? Councillor DeVoli, Member Rady, staff. I don't know who's taking this one.
Yeah, so again, I'll defer to Ben.
Thanks, Brendan. Through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. To give a brief synopsis on the report, the town is required to renew its drinking water license every 5 years. Our application is due in April of 2024. As a requirement of the renewal application, we must submit our financial plan covering a 6-year period. The one submitted to you covers a 7-year period, 2023 inclusive to 2029. The report brought forward this evening summarizes the financial plan, which was produced by the town's consultant, DFA, again covering the period of 2023 to 2029. For the town of Grimsby, the financial plan is a result of the 2023 rate study review analysis, but formatted to be in compliance with OREG 45307 financial plans. How the report complies with the regulation is summarized in Appendix A for your reference. Although there is no technical requirement for us to prepare or for the town to prepare a financial plan for wastewater, staff did determine it was best practice to do so. In a general summary, and a lack of other terms, the DFA has found the town's drinking water system and its financial outlook to be in good condition, and the wastewater system financial outlook to be in excellent condition. Overall, staff are looking for council's endorsement of the plan to be able to submit to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and eventually include with our drinking water license renewal. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Marconato? Councillor DeVoli.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to say there were two different sentences in this report, and you just mentioned them, that stood out to me. And one was that our water system is, in good standing, and our wastewater is in excellent standing. So what would it take for us to move water to be excellent in the same category as wastewater? How do they come to that determination, and what steps would we need to take to move it up?
I'm guessing, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm guessing the great versus, what was the other word, good versus great or excellent, is probably related to the reserve that we have in wastewater. I think it's upwards of greater than $10 million in terms of our reserve, and our water reserve is much lower. So I would think as we move forward, if we had a larger reserve, to basically more money in the bank to put towards rehabilitation programs, that likely move us into the excellent condition. So just while I have the opportunity, just to add that this is read in conjunction with our asset management plan that's being built by Marvin and the team. Again, it gives us the overall outlook of all of our assets, water, wastewater, roads, fleet, equipment, that kind of thing. So just to add that extra little nugget.
Councillor DeVoli.
One of the things that I found so fascinating about the report is that it talks about our system, and of course now we're talking about the amount of money that we have in reserves, and it's something that our Finance Committee has on its list of things to do, basically to look at all the reserves and to come up with some guidelines as to how much we should have in reserves, which ones are healthy, which ones are underfunded, and so on. And so, this report is a really good step to helping the Finance Committee also tackle the same issue. if we could be so good even to add it to our finance agenda, and I know I'm asking our staff here too, if we could, just to share it so that my finance committee members could be up to date on that too, that would be great. One of the things certainly that I noticed in there is that, you're right, the amount that we're setting aside into reserves is greater than what the amortization is of our current water and wastewater lines. And that's a really good thing, because amortization numerically is a concept based upon the original cost and I'll call it the usage of that asset over its life, which when you base it upon historical cost is not the amount we're going to have to spend today, tomorrow, or in the next couple of years to replace it. So we want monies going into reserves that are greater than the amortization calculations that we're doing, so that we, in today's dollars, are saving enough to be able to do that. And so I liked what I saw in this report, basically, that, we're really on track. And of course, wastewater is really, really on track, which is why I asked what we'd have to do to get the water system to have what I kind of humorously call it, an excellent rating in terms of what we do. So I did find this report enormously helpful, and I would love to share it with all the Finance Committee members too, as part of their education, so that when we eventually have a treasurer and can take on that report, that this would be part of it. Will there be other reports similar to this coming as part of the asset management plan, or just in general as part of our operational studies? Could you just talk to that, perhaps?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I guess the first question is, can we bring it to the Finance Committee? I think sharing it as information, I think that's fine. I just wouldn't want to make sure that we're duplicating the approval process, that's all. And we had a conversation about where does this most appropriate to go to? Is this a Public Works thing or is it a finance thing? So we landed on Public Works. So, and then the other question was, sorry, I forgot.
Will there be other reports?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so asset management, we're working on the non-core assets right now, and I think, is it July 2024 is the deadline for that? So we'll be looking at bringing, some information to council as part of that basically approval process for the non-core assets. I guess we're still, haven't got to the conversation about what's the best way to approach? Is that through Public Works, Finance, or direct to council? So that's one of the challenges we have with different committees is which one do we pick?
Member Spink and then Member Rady.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the financial stuff is not my background, but what I know as a taxpayer, I don't want to save money now in order to spend way more in the future, 10 years from now. So there were two things that I'm hoping that these aren't of concern. They kind of came out with me. One was in 2029, there was the forecast that there would be some debt. I just want an explanation of why we had to do that. And then the other one was, it's a ratio of the water capital assets, and that consumption ratio is decreasing, and there seemed to be some concern about that. And to me, it was like, okay, what does that mean? Maybe an explanation of both of those items to, hopefully, I won't have the concern.
I'm going to look to my finance partners if they can help with that. If not, if we can't give you an answer, we can certainly take away it as a team and come back to you with an appropriate response. Well, we can certainly collect that information and come back to you. I apologize. Ben and I were, exactly. And that's why the finance team is here. So yeah. No, we can certainly follow up on that and give you the correct answer.
Thank you. Member Rady.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Ben, when you did your last dynamic report, which is always a tough read, these things, man, the 2% of the 5% of the 1%, there was mention of legislation coming for wastewater. So will those reserves help us when it comes time for us to have to, because I'm looking, no lead, this is good. The TCA, the net value in the TCA looks good. is that money there for us to tap into when we do get legislated? Because I know one of the things that my financial friend over there was concerned about is what year are we going to have to add a resource in here for EHS? Because I think the water itself keeps you pretty busy. If we have legislation on wastewater, there's going to be another Ben, right? Ben 2. And do we tap into these reserves to finance what we need to finance to meet those goals? I'm just curious. I know I'm asking you to look into the future, but surely you must have a feel for when this is coming at us.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. So the town has been issued its 2 CLI ECAs for storm and sanitary, which do closely emulate drinking water. So there is, I'm not going to confirm anything, there is basically communications and talks that the requirements under drinking water will soon apply to wastewater and stormwater as well. So there is an anticipation that we will have to prepare these same type of reports for those systems. Again, why we prepared or why staff chose it necessary to do a wastewater financial plan and assessment was just following industry best practice. So I think overall the industry does see that there is an emulation of the drinking water system coming. So to be proactive, to forecast and assess those financials.
So, great. I'm glad you're looking forward because I think we see it coming at us like a train. We'll be having to tap into resource to spend money, for example, let's go with stormwater because that's a real tough one, right? We've got all kinds of stormwater. Will we need to spend money to fix that to meet these CLIs, I guess, is where I'm going with this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I'm getting you, maybe to say it another way. So we have a plenty reserve in wastewater. Stormwater is a smaller reserve. Over the last few years, it used to be funded through our roads and tax base, and now it's now funded through its own reserve. So I believe that reserve is much lower. So we're looking at strategies on how we can increase that reserve to in line with, as Councillor Davoli had said, is what is the best money or place to put that money into those reserves. So in terms of costs for rehabilitation, that's part of our asset management plan and these type of financial analysis is to look at to make sure that, as part of our forecast, here's what we need to accomplish in the next 10 years. Do we have enough funds to fund that over the next 10 years, or do we have to go into debt? And I think that's where you're seeing, at least on the water and wastewater side things, we're in a healthy situation, and where the asset management plan comes into effect is the other assets like roads and your stormwater system and our fleet and equipment and stuff like that. So all of that will come through that asset management exercise, which will then tell us where we are in terms of our overall health and where we need to invest in the future to make sure that we have the money available when we need to make those replacements or in the future.
Just to add, just to add to that, I can tell you that I remember 20 years ago when I first saw my first public works budget, and the public works budget was always the biggest binder because it's where we spend the most money. But also, not just because where we spend the most money, it's also it involves the most long-term planning from a financial perspective. So I've always been impressed by the long-term planning and the financial planning that goes into, looking 10 years down the line. And while I've moved away from paper, I always appreciated having a binder for those budgets because you could flip through and go, okay, what are we doing in 2015, 2016, 2017? And it really helped you to understand the way that Public Works planned and the way that it budgeted and the way that it was, the cast iron replacement is a really good example of that in the fact that year after year, we looked at a 25-year plan, but we were able to come in ahead of schedule a lot of the time because there were years where we received grants so we could double the amount of money that we put into it because we'd already budgeted for it, plus got $1 million grant, so we doubled the amount that we put in. I've always believed, and it might be an aside, that one of the important things, the reason why I've advocated for budgeting to come through the Public Works Committee and to come through the committees is because it's a very important part of the learning process for everybody. I think that the way that we spend money also informs what we do, right? It goes hand in hand as a municipality. So if we can look at the budget and look at the way that we spend money, we also will understand how things are done in the long term, how the planning is done in the long term. When it comes to the wastewater, going back to what Member Rady said, going back to the idea of the reporting system for wastewater and stormwater, while I understand that it might be coming down from the top in the same way that water is, it will be a very difficult one for other municipalities to implement because we all are aware of the issues that exist in other municipalities. Other municipalities and large municipalities and older municipalities especially have not been able to keep up in the way that Grimsby has. You know, some of our neighboring municipalities, for example, have stormwater and wastewater that merge in the urban area, which is, I can't imagine that even if they put it in next year, it would have to be a 20-year plan expecting those municipalities to come online with that kind of a plan, because in some of these neighboring municipalities, nothing has been done to start to do what we've done in Grimsby. And I'm not trying to point a finger. I think that there's just so much to manage in some of these larger municipalities that they haven't been able to tackle that problem the way that we have. So while a reporting system might come down, it will be eased in, and unlike water, while there are health concerns related to wastewater, obviously, it won't be, they aren't immediate in the same way that water treatment is. And I hope we don't have to have an incident like we had with water to cause that to come into place, but we've seen huge, large-scale dumping over the last few years as a result of the inability to treat wastewater in other municipalities. So I'm hoping that it comes in sooner than later, and I hope that that change occurs. Sorry, Brandon, I'll let you respond, and then Councillor DeVoley, I went on a bit of a rant there.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So just to add, we do have a program, I&I reduction strategy, which is infiltration and inflow. So that's basically trying to get the stormwater out of the sanitary sewer. So Marvin and the team have done a lot of work in the last couple of years in identifying our bad areas and the areas that we need some further attention, and we're continuing to work on that. So likely that's where you're going to see some of our a lot of our money spent in the next little bit, is how we're rehabilitating the system to remove that water that's coming in during the storm events.
Thanks, Brendan. And I don't think people understand, I'm going to get to you, I swear. I don't think people understand that from a financial perspective, when stormwater goes into the wastewater system, that means we have to treat stormwater in the same way that we treat sanitary water, and that's a huge cost. So anytime that we can remove that stormwater from the wastewater system, in the long term, it's a huge savings from the municipality. So spending $1 now saves us $10 in the long run. So that whatever we can do to make that happen is important. Councillor DeVoley, I apologize.
Chair, I'm not sure I remember my question anymore. And maybe it was just a comment, really, to wrap all this up. But truly, even at finance, we're sitting at, waiting for the asset management studies to be completed and so on, because what we really want to do is bring together the long-term planning function of, what are our long-term needs year by year by year, and then what monies have we already saved for it? What is the gap going to be? Inevitably, there will be a gap. Can we fund this by saving a bit more until we get those? Are we going to be in a debt situation? So it's really about bringing those two concepts together, the long-term planning that each of our departments are working on in terms of their capital, and also then bringing the long-term planning function of how we finance and pay for these things over those years. So hopefully we're going to have a perfect melding of this road. The two roads are going to come together. And and we'll see where the dollars land, basically, and if there is a gap. And I truly expect there will be a gap, because that has been the history of municipalities across the provinces, that inevitably they are hard-pressed to keep up with these capital projects and to keep the tax increases down. And those two go at odds to each other. And so we're about to find out how big that gap is. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Member Murphy?
Just a quickie. I noticed under operations and maintenance cost projections, most of the cost projections are 2%, 3%, 5%, but the regions projection for wastewater treatment for each year for the next 6-year period is 10%. And I just thought that was kind of large.
So I don't know if I can speak specifically to that, other than that, that we would have reached out to the region to understand their basically charges, expenses that we would be coming in from the region, and I'm sure we've tried to capture that in this report.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions or comments, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Davoli, seconded by Member Rady. Resolved that the water system financial plan, including the financial statements presented herein, should be approved for submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in accordance with municipal drinking water license requirements and Ontario Regulation 453/07. All in favor? That's carried.
Chair, could I just ask if we could note it in the minutes to have this report shared with Finance at the next committee? And truly just a sharing, just so that all the Finance Committee members are up to speed on this too.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, through you, Chair. We absolutely can. We can put it on as correspondence if you'd like.
Thank you. Next, we have Report DPW 2405 on parking restrictions along McNabb, Nellis, and Redwood. Second verse, same as the first. Can I please get a mover and seconder to get this item on the floor for discussion? Member Smink, seconded by Member Murphy. Staff, can you get us started?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the report before you brings forward some recommendations with respect to changes to parking restrictions on McNabb, Redwood, and Nels. If you remember last year, staff brought forward some recommendations that were supported by the Public Works Committee, but then went to council and there was a change in direction. It was referred back to staff. So we've basically met with the local councillor who has been advocating on behalf of the residents or constituents in that area, and we've come up with a solution that we felt both of us could support. So essentially what we're doing is we're recommending that on-street parking be permitted on one side of Redwood to McNabb, and on Redwood from Governors to the first bend west of Governors. In addition, we provide on the opposite side weekday daytime parking restrictions on each section of those same roads. So the restrictions would be in place from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. So essentially this means that you can park on the one side of the road at any time, and you can park on the opposite side of the road only outside of those hours. Also, we're changing the restrictions on Nels to be no stopping, and that's between Main and Kennedy. So providing that we receive council approval on these changes, we'll implement the new signage shortly thereafter in the coming months. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Member Smink?
I wanted to tell the staff that I thought this was a very good balanced approach. There had been some concerns with residents on neighboring streets, and I think that just restricting the parking on one side is going to satisfy those concerns. I had observed some. It was illegal parking on Nellis, and I know that you've kind of taken a step further and said no stopping. I know there's a lot of drop-off. I just wanted to ensure that there had been some consultation with the Greenbelt Academy, and that they were going to be corresponding with their staff and their parents, because that's the biggest group of motorists who's going to be affected.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for sure, of course. Yeah, and we've been in conversation with the residents on multiple occasions in terms of our notices that we've been delivering, and finally have come to, hopefully this is the final solution for now. Just to add to, in terms of the transportation master plan, we wanted to look at busy areas and on-street parking in general to make sure that we're applying a standard equally to all of the streets. So, so that'll be something that we look at as part of the TMP is, you know, what is the right policy for on-street parking in busy areas like the hospital. So we'll be advancing that conversation just to make sure there's some consistency and that we're not essentially pushing the problem around to another street. It just becomes another problem.
Thanks, Brendan. Councillor Cristangi? Oh, sorry.
Just one really quick follow-up. When you look at that with the TMP, if you could look at streets with and without sidewalks, I think there's a differential there.
Councillor Cristangi?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I like this. I think this is fantastic. My concern is across Main Street on Sunny Lee Crescent and Brookside because it's already an issue on both sides of the street. There's been many complaints. They're complaining that emergency vehicles aren't going to be able to get through because there's 30-plus cars on both sides. So my concern with this is now the ones that we're shifting, and we're going to shift to the two areas because Linwood already has restrictions, so Brookside and Sunny Lee do not yet. And so we're going to be here in a month doing this for those streets as well. So do we have a plan of action for those streets?
So again, that's where the TMP comes in. Again, I was kind of reluctant to make any changes, but understanding that we're dealing with a concern for over a year now, that we're trying to address that through these changes and restrictions. The situation on Brookside and Linwood, I think, comes as a result of us providing full daytime restrictions on Linwood, is it Linwood, that runs north-south? So essentially it's moved the traffic over to Brookside and to Sunny Lee. So our bylaw is enforcing where appropriate any illegal parking, but it's something that we do want to look at as part of, holistically as part of our TMP. So are there immediate changes that we're proposing? No, but we'll certainly keep an eye on that situation and as well as the changes that are going to occur as a result of the changes that we're making on McNabb and Redwood. I would say that by allowing on-street parking on McNabb and Redwood, and that was maybe part of the resistance staff initially had, was we didn't want to move the problem around, so we're comfortable that now that we're allowing it on one side of the road, you're going to get the people who have made a habit to park there still having that ability. We're not pushing them to another location. So that's our goal anyways, but we'll continue to monitor it.
Member Rady, did you have a?
Just again, wanted to thank Michael for the report. I think it was a well-balanced report. And just an FYI, I was at the lab yesterday donating stuff. And on Friday, and I see that Coles now has visitor parking in Coles. Obviously, it's going to be temporary, but hey, a little bit of relief looked to me like there was maybe 30 or 40 spots in the Coles parking lot. So just an FYI. Well, yes, Coles / Lausanne, yes. I can't keep up.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree that it's almost impossible to find a perfect solution in this case. You know, you're trying to balance people who live there being able to park on the street in front of their own homes, but not pushing it from this neighborhood to the next, as Councilor Cristangi mentions. You know, every time we restrict parking on one street, it just moves it to another one because people they're going to keep searching for a place to park. So I think that this is a fair compromise. I drove in defense of the people who were complaining. Every once in a while, I just drive through the neighborhood, and it is, I mean, there's parking on both sides of the road, all the way down the road, and on that little stretch there, and it's a very narrow roadway with no sidewalks. So I can understand people's concerns. So I think that this one side of the road parking does temporarily solve the problem, and I hope that long term, once the hospital's built, we won't need to deal with this anymore because there'll be plenty of parking on site and people will go back to parking on site again. Because it wasn't a problem for the last 60 or 70 years of the hospital. And I'm hoping in the long run it won't be a problem in the long run. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Member Spink, seconded by Member Murphy. Resolved that report GPW 2405, parking restrictions along McNabb Drive, Nellis Road South, and Redwood Drive, dated February 26, 2024, be received, and that the proposed bylaw amendment provided herein be approved by council. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. correspondence. We have correspondence from Niagara Region RV Anderson Associates Limited. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence for information? Councillor DeVoli, Member Rady. Resolved that the following correspondence be received for information: Niagara Region Blue Box Transition, Niagara Region Waste Management Bylaw Update, and RV Anderson and Associates Limited, Grimsby Water Treatment Plant Class EA. All in favor? That's carried. Other business. Member Spink.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to raise for discussion and perhaps for my information, my understanding of why we haven't had a Public Works Committee meeting in 3 months, but at least 2 items were brought direct to council. I know that there is a review of standing committees coming this spring, and I just want to put it out, for the committee members, what are the criteria for, the direct items going, timing, overall public. I wanted to put it out there.
Sure, through you, Chair. So again, I understand, obviously it's a lot of, I would say, balls in the air when it comes to the downtown projects. We've been scrambling to try to get that both the studies completed to the final state that we could move on to the next phase. One of the conscious decisions that we made as staff was both of these reports involved a consultant that was going to come in and present to council or present to committee, and what we didn't want was to duplicate that effort, understanding that obviously not in the old system all the members on committees would be at council. So it wasn't whether it went to council or committee, I guess it didn't really matter. But under the new system, the fact that we have members of the community on the committee, understanding that does impact you. So again, I'm hoping that this is a rare case that this happened, but it is something that we are challenged with as kind of we move forward. And as you mentioned, that there is the whole governance review is on the plate as well. So again, all I can do is apologize, but we're doing our best to inform all of the different committees. And again, that was part of the idea on the DAA, bringing that discussion as well as it just happened that the DAA meeting happened before Public Works Committee. If that wasn't the case, I would have brought to Public Works Committee first, but yeah, I hope you.
Thank you, Brendan. Councillor DeVoli.
Yeah, so to kind of leapfrog off Mr. Wortman and Member Smeek, it is something that, and we really kind of agonize about it as to which way should it go and so on, trying to keep everybody in the loop. And so as you were speaking, I thought, the next time we have this happen, let's say where the issue involves consultants and it's good to just have one presentation to all of council, would it be helpful perhaps to reach out to whichever standing committee is most affected and to issue an invitation to our members at large, just to say, a report is coming, it's going to all of council, let's say it's on parking or whatever, please come to council, and maybe that would help us in between until we figure out a better way, or to at least let people know, and then they don't have to physically come, but they could at least watch the presentation on Zoom from the public meeting.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we did provide a form of communication. I think it was by email. It was late, might have been late last year, early this year, just to, hey, here's what our plan is for coming to council. So we did want to communicate that to you. And I was going to say something else, but I forgot. So I'll wait till it comes back.
If I can, I asked the same question. So I think some of the projects were started before the committee system was put back in place, and therefore they went, because they originated at council, they went straight back to council. I share your concerns, though, Member Spink, and I Brandon, you mentioned the old system, but you're talking about the old system, the most recent old system, right, which is a committee of the whole system. But under the committee system, and I can tell you that I chaired lots of meetings under the old committee system, and I chaired meetings regarding the official plan, the zoning review, like large projects similar to the ones that we're talking about here. And the consultants came to the committee, did their presentations at the committee, and then came and did a more summarized presentation at council. But they did 2 presentations. It was never an issue in the past, so I don't know why it suddenly is an issue. It should be part of what we're putting out in the RFP process. It should be, the expectation should be, we have a committee system, and this is in my humble opinion, so the expectation in my humble opinion should be that if there is something that is relevant to the planning committee, for example, it comes before the planning committee first, because the official plan is being done now. Under the same justification for going straight to council with the things that we talked about recently, you could do the same thing with the official plan. And you have a planning committee that really should be looking at the official plan and dealing with it and discussing it in that committee before it gets to council. So I hope that we're able to, in that governance review process, iron out all these details. But I don't think that there's any, when we're paying top dollar for consultants, asking them to make another 15-minute presentation and answer a few more questions, I don't think is an unreasonable ask. So I think that that's something we should be asking for, and I share your concerns. So. Member Murphy?
Yeah, I want to come back to the Century 21 thing just for a minute and suggest that if all these changes are suddenly sprung on the town, there's going to be chaos. And one of the things that you might consider doing is preparing a handout or a brochure that goes to the people of Grimsby to say there's some big changes coming for downtown, and maybe you want to consider when you're traveling, alternate routes, that sort of thing, some signage, so that people are prepared ahead of time that this is going to happen. Otherwise, if people are driving out there some morning and all of a sudden 2 lanes or a lane is shut off between Elm Street and, say, Rossmore Boulevard or whatever, it's going to cause some problems. And I just think communication of this ahead of time would be a good idea.
Yeah, that does typically happen. Mr. Wortman might respond to that, but I'm sure it'll be published in the newspaper, shared via social media, all of those things, because, yeah, I agree that we don't want it to be a surprise. The road's closed downtown and there are shovels in the ground. So I'm assuming there's going to be many notifications prior to the project and specific to what's going to happen.
Sorry, through you, sir, just you nailed that, and I guess the other part of that is as well as how can we, what is because we're talking as a team as what form of, the only thing I can say is an open for business campaign can we implement to help communicate all of this through the project, and different phases are going to bring different changes to the traffic and how you get in and out of the buildings and kind of and those kind of things. So yes, communication during that process will be a huge lift for us, and we want to make sure that we're keeping everyone on top of it.
Okay, Member Rady.
Thank you, Chair. I jokingly teased Brandon quite a bit about the Unicorn project, and I see it made the budget document this year that the CMMS system is in place now for transportation. When do we get to see it? And will we also get to see the CRM module? Is it part of it? Because if I believe what I read in the budget document, transportation is done and you're moving on to the next phase. Could we get a 10 or 15-minute dog and pony show from somebody, either using your UAT stuff or just, hey, this is what you're going to see?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess I was going to make a joke here, but now I've lost the punchline. Is the unicorn a good thing, or is the unicorn a bad thing?
Unicorns don't exist. So it's a bad thing, and it's $1 million project. So it's our biggest project.
Yeah. So what I can say is we've implemented the first phase, which was the transportation division. In terms of the customer relations module, I'll put it this way. As we've gone through this project, we've understood if there's limitations with the software, or if there's this software over here is that we are currently using is a better way of doing it. Well, we've recognized that as we've moved forward through it. So the part of it is the customer relations module. We've decided to go in a different approach using a different piece of software that we already have available to us. So, and the IT team and our clerks department is looking at that as part of a larger customer relation strategy that they'll be brought forward. So, so I kind of answer some of your question. Can you see it? We can certainly set up a time. My only concern with demonstrating or showing that is there's customer information in there that is confidential, that it would be difficult for us to show you the ins and outs of the program without displaying that information. So we'd have to look at a way in terms of providing test
Signed
platform or
NDAs, for
something like that.
example, which we've all signed. We've all signed NDAs, right? You know that.
Well, it's just, it's again, through you, Mr. Chair, it's public information that again, I'd have to check with our clerk to see if that's information that we're able
So
to
I just want to make sure I
communicate
understand.
to
So we've
lay
gone
members.
forward with the CMMS system for transportation, which we've been working on for the last 2 years, and now we're switching gears and changing CRM to something else. I just want to make sure I understand.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. No, we've implemented the CMMS program as part of the transportation. There was a number of components to that, whether it was work order, whether it was asset management, whether it was customer relations, and again, we've looked at that specific component, the customer relations component, being utilized through the existing software that we already have on available to us. So in terms of next phases for implementation, we're looking at the drinking water, wastewater side of things, along with cemeteries on that side of things.
Any other new business? Seeing none, the next meeting of Public Works is scheduled for March 25th, 2024 at 6:30 PM. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.